¿Qué hay, amigos? ¿Cómo están? Bienvenidos una vez más a MadCripto. El día de hoy tenemos una súper entrevista con Derek Yoo, el fundador de Moonbeam. Vamos a estar haciéndoles preguntas de lo que es este proyecto y de lo que va a ser las Parachains, etcétera. Entonces, bueno, hello, Derek. How are you doing? Thanks for taking your time for having this call. And I'm looking forward to ask you some questions about Moonbeam and Moonriver. I don't know if you can do a little introduction about you, and then we can start with little questions I have prepared for you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you very much for having me. Yeah, I can give a quick introduction. Yeah, as I think you mentioned in the in your intro that I'm Derek Yoo. I'm the CEO of PureStake. We're the main company that's kind of building the project Moonbeam. And yeah, background is I've been building this kind of software for a long time. So for almost 25 years now, I guess, I've been building different software companies, different software platforms. Most recently, like in the Web3 and crypto space, that's since the beginning of 2019. Yeah, I guess we're obviously working on this project Moonbeam, which is in the Polkadot ecosystem. So I feel like we're pretty we're pretty close to and connected with a lot of the happenings kind of that are in the going on in the Polkadot ecosystem.
Awesome. Sounds awesome. So can you explain briefly to the community what's an overview of Moonbeam and Moonriver?
Yeah. So I mean, the first point is, so there's two things, and which is unusual. Sometimes people only have one thing, so we have two things. Just to explain briefly that. So Moonbeam is the name of our deployment to Polkadot. We'll be a parachain on the Polkadot network, and so that's what Moonbeam is. Moonriver is our deployment to Kusama. So some of you may be aware that there's this companion network to Polkadot called Kusama where things happen first. And so the name of our deployment to Kusama is called Moonriver, which is actually imminent here. That's happening quite shortly. That'll be launching. And so the quick overview of what Moonbeam and Moonriver are about is that we've basically have done an Ethereum implementation in Substrate. So Substrate is the kind of technical development framework that one uses to build things in Polkadot. And we've done this kind of Ethereum implementation, which means that when we're up and running, we'll have this environment that looks and feels and behaves like Ethereum, but it's going to be part of Polkadot. And so I think our idea is, kind of to take the best of both worlds, right? So you kind of have this environment that's Ethereum-like. So that means that, developers, that's what most developers in the space already know how to, develop on Ethereum. And that's where there's this huge set of tools and services that have been created over the last 6 years or so, to support development on Ethereum. So we can kind of leverage all of those. But at the same time, we're part of Polkadot. So that means that, we get security from Polkadot. That means we have this like native cross-chain kind of integration capability. And I think that's quite important, as when we look to the future, we think that this kind of native ability to communicate with other blockchains is going to be quite important and open the door to new kinds of applications. So that's the high level overview.
Sounds like a great explanation. And how about what would you say makes Moonbeam unique in the Polkadot ecosystem? Since I think there's a couple projects working on smart contracts and stuff like that. So what would you say makes the special thing about Moonbeam?
Yeah, I would say that, I mean, the thing that we're obviously, most well known for is this kind of Ethereum compatibility work.
Mm-hmm.
So we've worked pretty closely, in partnership with Parity on this work. And, by agreement with Parity, a lot of this work has gone into a repository called Frontier. So Frontier actually lives under the Parity, like GitHub, basically. So like, it's kind of officially a Parity project, although we've done quite a bit of work in it. Yeah, I think it's useful. So a lot of other people are kind of maybe incorporating these components into their chains as well. But yeah, I would say that, given that we're, kind of the primary contributor other than Parity to this, that, we're kind of maybe have a reputation or known as, hey, like if you need Ethereum compatibility, Moonbeam is, that's the team that kind of knows a lot about this. I would say also that, what we've come to discover is that when you're trying to build a smart contract chain, obviously the core features is one thing, but there's more to it than that, right? It's basically there's all of these other kind of integrations that you need around the core, and we've done a lot of work on that. as well as it's kind of the ecosystem itself, right? So you need to have, if you're a DeFi project in particular, you need to have other DeFi protocols already there to be able to function, and so we've been doing quite a bit of work in this area, building up kind of a whole ecosystem of different protocols and partners that will be deploying to Moonbeam. So I'd say those are probably the most important distinguishers.
Yeah, definitely. That excites me a lot. All the partnerships and teams building already in Moonbeam. So that's a great work over there. I wanted to ask you, talking about this Ethereum compatibility, besides the cross-chain capabilities that the Polkadot ecosystem brings, in theory, any bridge that already works to connect Ethereum to other chains could connect Moonbeam as well?
Yeah, I think that's true. And in general, that's a kind of a great benefit we have by providing this Ethereum-like environment. It means, it's the tools on the one hand, so things like, Hard Hat, like Truffle, and MetaMask, all these tools is one thing that we are compatible with and can use, but also integrations. So I think what we found is for a lot of other blockchains that are not part of the Polkadot ecosystem, we still want to connect to them and kind of allow, at least for the ability for assets to move. And almost all those projects already have an existing integration back to Ethereum mainnet. So that's been quite helpful to us, because then they can kind of generally take that integration, copy it and point it at Moonbeam, and then that can be their Polkadot integration. And so I think that's definitely something that, several of the partnerships we have are of that nature, where they see us as kind of like we're the kind of the gateway to Polkadot in a way, right? And I think in general, for a lot of the projects working with us, that's how they see us, is we're this kind of easy on-ramp gateway to Polkadot. They want access to the users and assets that are on Polkadot. And then we're doing work to basically bring those users and assets to Moonbeam, where they can be kind of worked with in this Ethereum compatible way. So I think, we're kind of minimizing, I think, the engineering work needed to kind of get at like these assets, right? So even for assets, we don't want it to be specific, right? Like one of the things we're doing is allowing assets to come to Moonbeam. They'll be represented like as a precompile. So it's kind of this built-in function like a Moonbeam, but like kind of this presenting kind of an ERC20 like interface. So then they can be used by all these other existing, these protocols that already exist. So that's kind of the bridging work we're doing to kind of connect Polkadot like native things back to, into this Ethereum like environment.
Nice work. And I wanted to ask you, are there any kind of specific projects you're looking forward to seeing built on Moonbeam, like NFTs, DeFi, something like that? Or you aren't focusing on anything specific?
Well, I would say that, we definitely are kind of a pure infrastructure platform. So we don't, first of all, we ourselves don't do any of these kind of end user facing features. We, our user is a development team. And then in terms of what use cases to focus on, I would say that we were pretty unopinionated about this, when we started, and we said, okay, let's just go talk to like projects, like, particularly Ethereum-based projects about, what we're doing and to look for interest. And what I'd say is that we definitely have found interest concentrated into certain areas. The biggest concentration, by far is in the DeFi sector. So I'd say that these projects are, I think, some of the more aggressive to deploy. They're the, more aggressively pursuing multi-chain deployment strategies. So I'd say it's number one is DeFi, but then after that would be NFT and gaming. We do see, we definitely do see interest there. But it's this DeFi that I would say was where the most of our adoption is. So that's where we've, that's where we've been focusing most of our energy. And as I was saying before, it's one of these things where I think there's strength in having like a lot of these DeFi partnerships, because you need enough of these protocols to be there in order for any other like DeFi project to be able to deploy, right? So there's kind of like, there's all these different areas you need to cover, like DEXs, stable coins, lending and borrowing protocols, synthetics platforms. And so I think that, at this point we have enough coverage where all these basic like DeFi building blocks are there. So I think that then makes it attractive for it's kind of a snowball effect where once you have all those, then the next DeFi project comes along and is like, oh, I want to go to like where there's already all these other DeFi projects. So that's kind of starting to happen, from my perspective.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. DeFi is really big, and having the building blocks is really important. I wanted to change it a little bit and talk about the token mechanism, talking about the token burning mechanism for transaction fees. Mm-hmm. You have that, right? And what do you think would be the percentage of tokens burned? Do you think at one point it would be larger than the inflation rate that the token has?
That's a good question. So there's a base mechanic, and let me just explain first, like what, how the system works. So there's a base mechanic right now that we'll have as we launch, which takes fees, so gas fees, and 80% of them are burned for any gas fees that are paid into the system, and 20% are sent to the treasury. So the treasury is basically an on-chain pot of funds that can be spent on kind of common goods via governance. And this is exactly the same mechanic that exists on the Polkadot and Kusama relay chains, right? There's a treasury, and you can kind of use governance to propose like spending of that treasury. But this 80% burn, I think, is, of the fees is kind of what you're talking about there. So we do have a 5% inflationary supply. That inflation, just for context, is basically paying for security for the chain. So the inflation is paying basically for collator selection, kind of the staking mechanics in the system that allows the collators, which are the block producers, to be selected, giving them protocol level incentives to be able to run their operations and produce these blocks, as well as some funds going towards the chain's ability to pay for itself to be a parachain, right? So this parachain bond reserve is basically funds that are being collected so that we can kind of continue, that the chain can continue to stay a parachain, right? Because you need to pay basically for that on an ongoing basis. So that's the present situation. And so your question, so I think that the question, okay, so there's this kind of inflationary component of the token economics, but then there's also this deflationary component, which is the burn. And right now, I mean, we'll obviously have to see how much utilization there is, but certainly it is the case that if there is enough utilization and enough gas fees being spent, it could turn into a deflationary situation. I don't expect that kind of in the early days of the network, right? I think that, in particular, like, it's going to take some time for the blocks to fill because we have, we would open the doors on the first day, the blocks are basically empty, right? So it's going to take a while for the blocks to fill, and then you start to have some competition basically to fill the blocks where that might increase like some of the fees. But yeah, I think in the long run, it'll be interesting to see, like, with enough utilization, like there could be a deflationary, kind of situation. And, I think there are other changes that are coming too. So just to preview that, what we are also kind of in parallel working on kind of what our implementation of EIP 1559 is going to look like. So that's obviously, people may be aware that that's a pretty significant change that's coming to Ethereum. We need to kind of, have a strategy around that, because I think a lot of dApps and a lot of tools are going to start assuming that that's in place. And we can't adopt it exactly because, we have a different kind of setup. So, but we're going to be adopting basically something that's compatible like with EIP 1559. So that may change some of these parameters slightly, but, that's part of our strategy where we need to basically stay like maximally compatible with what's going on Ethereum, so that Ethereum dApps can just be deployed very easily, like without changing many of the assumptions as they get deployed to Moonbeam. So that's kind of coming, probably later this year we'll be kind of rolling that out as well.
Interesting. Do you think that that would be like chosen through an on-chain vote?
All upgrades, so like, I mean, we're adopting the full kind of like substrate like governance like stack basically, right? The same way that Kusama and Polkadot like are. So all upgrades will be subject to like on-chain governance basically, as with any other change to the system. So upgrades being the most significant, but yeah, if there's an upgrade, then it'll be put forth as a proposal, and then it needs to get backed, and ultimately it will need to get voted on to go in.
And I wanted to ask you, a way to get the Moonriver token will be supporting the project through the crowd loan, right? But I wanted to ask you if there's going to be another way to get the token, like a public sale on an exchange or an initial DEX offering to start liquidity, since there isn't going to be as much movement at first with the token.
Yeah, so there are no plans right now. So, the Moonbeam Foundation is the one running like this crowd loan. So I would say that is definitely the primary way to initially distribute tokens. The foundation is putting up 30% of the Genesis supply like on this initial crowd loan. So I think that's probably the best way right now. And obviously it helps support the project get into a slot. There is no plan to, pre-sell like anything. And that's actually part of the it's almost part of the strategy or the philosophy around Moonriver, which is that, you know, it is a little bit unique if you look around among Polkadot projects where we actually, the supply, there is no like VCs, like even the founding team like isn't part of the Genesis like supply. Really, like the crowd loan is the way that you can initially get at tokens, or being a collator is the other way. And we do have some other programs planned, but you know, I'm sure there are going to be. I'm sure that there's going to be exchange support, right? Like for mover tokens, like on Moonriver. That's certainly going to happen. You know, when it comes to DEXs, and you mentioned kind of initial DEX offering, the thinking there is that, you know, we definitely, I'm sure that will also happen, but it's going to happen like on Moonriver itself, right? So, you know, there's this DeFi ecosystem we're talking about that includes like a whole bunch of DEXs. I mean, we have, you know, key DEX partners, you know, Sushi is one of the primary ones, IDEX, Zero Exchange, you know, we have at least like a half dozen, Dodo is another one that are deploying to Moonriver. You know, we want to basically make sure that, yeah, I think that'll be another way to, you know, access the token would be just natively. You know, one of the things we're thinking through now is, you know, how to bootstrap things as well. So I think there, you know, we are going to be, or the foundation, I should say, is going to be running a number of liquidity bootstrapping programs to draw like liquidity like into the system. And certainly, you know, some of those programs will be, you know, using like using the underlying platform token. But that's, you know, kind of contextually what we see is that, like, you know, I think high level, right, it was like BSC was kind of the destination where like a lot of, let's call it like yield, like, and kind of liquidity kind of activity was happening like on BSC kind of late last year and early this year. And then I think a lot of that has shifted kind of to Polygon and like Matic now, like there's a lot of activity happening there. And we see kind of Moonriver and Moonbeam as being, you know, kind of potential kind of new destinations where like the attention may shift, like as we, you know, as there's all these deployments and, you know, we start like running a lot, you know, some of these other programs basically to, you know, help bootstrap like the ecosystem.
Yeah, definitely. And even more because of this compatibility. It says ECS bridging to Polygon, it would be to Moonbeam, right? Yeah. That's interesting. I want to ask you about that, specifically the tokens that you're offering for the crowd loan. It's way larger than the other teams. Why is this? Why did you choose to share so many tokens with the community?
Yeah, and yeah, you know, again, I'd clarify that, you know, there's kind of Pure Stake and us, but then there's the Moonbeam Foundation that's running, you know, kind of the you know, the ones launching the network. But the idea is pretty straightforward, which is that, well, a few ideas. I mean, we obviously, you know, Moonriver for us is serving a practical need, like in one sense, which is that, you know, it's kind of the original parity idea of like, hey, like, let's have an environment we can deploy to first. There's real economic conditions where kind of it's a little bit more experimental. It's a little bit more kind of on the edge. So I think we believe in that and you know, believe that, you know, there'll ultimately be a quicker moving, more adaptable, higher quality product in the end by, you know, having these like multiple deployment destinations and this kind of deployment pipeline. But I think the other idea is, you know, that like, you know, there's kind of different like different environments can lead to like different outcomes, right? Different use cases like might adopt like, you know, either Moonriver versus Moonbeam. And definitely one of the key parameters that like influences the outcome of a chain is like the holders, right? And like who it is that holds things. So we kind of see Moonriver as a way to, you know, run an experiment in the spirit of like Kusama and Moonriver. It's like, well, let's try like a different like you know, set of holders basically to start and see if that influences like how things evolve. And we specifically wanted it to really emphasize kind of the community basically, right? Like as much as we could. And that's why even like, you know, we're foregoing even like the team, you know, as well as any, you know, anyone else who supported us like is not in that initial holder set. And we wanted to kind of have it be this, you know, that anyone who wanted to kind of participate could do so. And so that's, you know, that's where we came up with the kind of token distribution strategy. And, you know, this 30% is large. It's not because we think it's that much is needed to like win a slot. We're using it as a token distribution mechanism, right? So that's kind of the idea, is we're, you know, kind of overpaying, like intentionally overpaying for, you know, the auction, like in order to be able to like distribute like tokens into the hands of community members.
Yeah, definitely. It's gonna get interesting. Can't wait for that to happen. And talking about the crowd loans, is there any minimum or maximum amount of Kusama that can be used to support the Moonriver crowd loan?
So on the minimum side, it's just we're not enforcing any minimum, but the Kusama relay chain enforces a minimum. So the minimum contribution amount is 0.1 KSM, and that's like in the relay chain code. So that's not something that, again, we're not doing that, but that is something that the relay chain itself enforces. So that would be the minimum contribution amount. There is no maximum. So kind of the idea is that you know, whatever your contribution amount is to the crowd loan, you know, you'll get like a ratable percentage of the rewards based on your contribution divided by the total contribution. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we don't know what that will be, but you know, obviously, like we want, you know, we intend for it to be a winning amount to get us into one of these first 5 slots that are going to be made available shortly here.
And besides the token as a reward for helping Moonriver to become a parachain, do you plan maybe on giving an NFT? Because I heard some other teams are doing this. Maybe you're thinking about it.
Yeah, we don't have any kind of direct plan right now, but I think in general, you know, the idea of using or kind of like employing NFTs is something that we're like exploring quite a bit of. You know, I referred before to this kind of idea of, okay, well, once the network is launched, you know, how do we bootstrap like liquidity like into the DeFi ecosystem that's being created there? And so obviously the tried and true method is basically kind of liquidity mining, I'd say, where you take certain pairs on like, you know, it'd be in our case, it'd be like Sushi, like one of our main partners, and then you're providing like extra like you know, liquidity mining incentives basically on those pools. But you know, what I see that's quite interesting is, you know, that there's a number of people pursuing this idea of like using NFTs as a way to like incentivize like their community and kind of like adoption. And then, you know, I think of it almost, it looks kind of like a, you know, like an airline loyalty program kind of thing, right? Where it's like you kind of have this thing and maybe you get a different NFT for how much engagement you're doing. And then, oh, it's like, oh, you're a platinum member. And then that might mean, that might have meaning then. It might be like, oh, you get, you know, like reduced fees, like on, you know, for certain actions, or you get, you know, VIP lounge access, whatever that means, right? It kind of like means something. So I kind of see that's the direction that things are heading in, but it's still pretty early with that stuff. So I think that, you know, we're going to experiment with a few different things, probably something in that area, but you know, I don't think we're going to bet though. I mean, we still, you know, tried and true in this world obviously just means that there's like 6 months of history to look at. It's not even that much history, but you know, that's been more on this standard like liquidity mining kind of techniques.
And about the Parachain slot, you're aiming to get a 48-week slot. What will happen when this is complete? When the period's complete, are you looking to participate in another Parachain auction, raising funds through a crowd loan, or maybe use this treasury funds from the Parachain to participate in a future auction?
Right. Yeah. You know, and I'd honestly say here that like basically Parachain continuity. Some of these, like we've been asking some of these questions. Some of these questions are like not even clear. I don't even know that like some of the paths exist like in the code yet. So there'll have to be further upgrades even to the relay chain to support like this. But of course, like you know, we plan to have basically like to support continuity of both our both the Moonriver and the Moonbeam deployments in perpetuity, basically, right? And I think we want to ultimately get to the point where they are self-sovereign. So I mean, the idea behind, I was mentioning this inflation, the idea is that, you know, we want ultimately for the chain itself to like have enough, you know, of the relay chain asset, so that it itself, like, you know, via governance can bid like on like a slot and basically can kind of be self-sovereign, right? It can like, you know, the chain itself would have enough funds to basically continue to occupy a slot in perpetuity. So that's the ultimate goal. Obviously in the early days, we're you know, we as a team are kind of helping kind of bootstrap things and make sure that, you know, when things are still nascent, you know, like, you know, this, you know, bucket that's kind of accruing funds from inflation, like, you know, won't be that full basically like in the first like period. So like we're gonna, you know, the foundation will need to help basically make sure that the that both projects, you know, maintain a slot. The exact mechanics, you know, what we have been told is that it will not be a crowd loan that looks exactly the same as this first round. And the reason for that is that I think that, you know, Parity kind of implemented like the crowd loan functionality that exists is on the relay chain, and that is not where they ultimately want it. They're trying to keep the relay chain minimal, where it only does security for the parachains. So there's going to be at least some changes where maybe that will get relocated to like some system parachain or get relocated somewhere. So our anticipation is that like we'll have to adapt, and then once it's clear like what the renewal and continuity process looks like, we'll obviously need to like run like a renewal campaign, let's call it, right? And we're prepared to help run whatever that form that takes. We'll prepare to run another crowd loan like campaign to like to stay in the slot.
But in theory, you could use the treasury funds to participate in an action.
Yeah, I think, well, there's this specific, as part of our, setup, we do have like a specific set of on-chain governed funds that are like earmarked for this purpose. Okay. Although there is some other mechanics we have to figure out. So, for example, the inflation that's feeding that treasury is in like the native platform token, right? So in the Moonriver, it would be mover tokens. The problem is, or the challenge is that that's the wrong asset, right? So you need actually like relay chain assets to do to bid on a slot. Mm-hmm. So this is something I've talked to a couple other teams, like there needs to be a way to converge. So we have like a number of DEXs that'll be like native, like on chain. Mm-hmm. We probably will try to use those, but there are some tricks here. I've talked this through with some people, because the problem is, the governance like on Moonriver say like there's a 7-day period, right? So the problem is you try to use an AMM based DEX, and let's say you have some huge trade you do, then it's kind of like this bullet that you see from like 7 days like in advance. So you're going to get like heavily front run. So there's like, we have to figure out some way to
definitely
randomize it or kind of split it up so that like it's not like that like we get like some kind of trade that like makes sense for the for those funds.
Definitely. Why would you say, Derek, why would the community participate in the Moonriver crowd loan? What are the benefits that Moonriver will provide to the community?
I mean, I think well, as we discussed, I mean, there's I think that it's a compelling kind of it's a compelling kind of campaign, like from the rewards bucket and other kind of perspectives. But I mean, I think that in some sense what we found is like I think you want to we're looking to engage with people that kind of believe in like the vision of the project, basically. This is something where I would say, especially since the beginning of this year, that's grown quite a bit, basically, in terms of even things like our ambassador program and other programs that we've launched this year. We're definitely have grown kind of our base of our community base. And yeah, so I think that's kind of the primary intended audience, is to offer some way for folks to get involved. And I would say the thing I've discovered here that's quite interesting too is that my assumption going into this was that kind of there would be whale VCs that like hold a lot of the KSM. That's turned out to not be true, basically, because I've talked to like a number of these like VCs, and a lot of the VCs, even if they got some like KSM, most of them sold it, basically because they didn't understand it, or there's they're like, oh great, there's this extra thing, and then but DOT is the real thing I care about. And so what it turns out is these KSM holders, there's like many small holders, basically, like, so it already the feeling of that chain is this more community kind of like feel to it. Mm-hmm. And so yeah, that's kind of in keeping with what we're trying to do. We just want to we want to just engage as many people as we can and expand kind of the community, like via this effort.
Yeah, definitely. I know there's many fanboys of Moonbeam and Moonriver, including myself, so there's gonna be interesting things happening. And I think the projects you're collaborating with already push a lot of people to look to Moonriver and Moonbeam, since they're really high quality projects that are already running in the Ethereum ecosystem. And I wanted to wrap it up. I saw that the pre-registration for the crowd loan is already live. So can anyone participate? Where can the community register to participate?
Yeah, so there's the Moonbeam Foundation is providing kind of two ways that one can participate. So one is there is like a DApp that the foundation is creating, and to look to perform this pre-registration function is part of the DApp, if you choose to go that route. And yeah, just to kind of specify, the other option would be to participate through an exchange that is supporting kind of the crowd loans, of which there are several. I think there have been a couple announcements so far, and there's going to be some more in the coming days. So that's the first choice, is okay, there's kind of DApp or exchange. And there I would say that kind of the guidance I'd give is that obviously the exchange I'd say is probably a little bit more of a easier like user experience. So like if you're not kind of like, if you're not kind of comfortable using kind of direct like on-chain tools, like probably the exchange route might be a better route. But the dApp is basically a direct like interaction without any intermediaries, where you'd be using the Polkadot like technology stack to interact like directly with the relay chain. And so the registration you talked about, if you go to the Moonbeam Foundation website, there's links there for how to perform this pre-registration action. And then of course we expect the the kind of auctions to be announced and for our crowd loan to commence shortly here. So that's going to be something that the Moonbeam Foundation will be announcing, and I think it's imminent, basically. Like,
sounds exciting. We can't wait, definitely. So thank you very much for your time, Derek. Definitely a very insightful talk with you. I don't know if you want to wrap it up saying something to the community, and I think we would be done with this.
Yeah, no, I mean, like I said, the community that's built around Moonriver is awesome. I know that you've been, thank you for your support, like, of the project and kind of helping us bring the message to your community. And we would just love to have your engagement. We are, trying really hard to kind of have like to just build a great community of supportive, like, folks. And we'd love to have your support for, the Moonriver crowd loan. So, I think that's what, we're all focused on that right now, because that's like kind of right on the front burner here, and so we just love that.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Derek.
Yeah,
take care.
Thanks for having me, Matteo. Thanks.